You are listening to the 80s Slasher Librarian. Keep listening, or I'll kill you.
And now the conclusion of Jason X to the Third Power, Chapter 17. "Where can we go?" Skye asked as they entered the lab. She slammed and bolted the door behind them, although she knew no lock could keep out either Jason. "Oh God, Free, there's nowhere, it's over." She doubled over from a stomach cramp. "It's not over until either we're dead or they are. I'm not giving up." Free paced the room for a couple of seconds. "How can we alter the programming of Jason 3? Free asked. Skye, gasping, shook her head. I don't know." They stood stymied for a moment. Suddenly, Free snapped his fingers. "I've got it. Remember when you did a brain transfer from everybody in the program? Everybody but me? What if you put my DNA, brain patterns, all of it, into the Jason 3 program? That would make him very different than Jason 2, right?" "Why would it? He has the material from the rest of us already, and it hasn't made him different." "But none of you share DNA with Jason. I do." Skye shook her head. "I think at best it would be a waste of time. At worst, it would put you at a disadvantage." Free went to her and shook her in his arms. "Skye, there's no waste of time anymore. We have to do something. This just might be the key, and if it's not, well, like you said, there's nowhere to go." "Maybe the sling. We could try to get there. Maybe if it moves far enough, we can board before it takes off for Thanos." Even as she said it, she knew it was a long shot. More likely, one of the Jasons would get them when they were trying to get on the sling. And if the best-case scenario was going to Thanos with a cage full of convicts, she no longer knew which alternative was the worst anymore. "Skye, we have to try it. Major Tom can change the programming with my authorization. And I don't know what would make a difference in the program of Jason 3, but he's the only one we can alter." "Might not help, but it can't hurt," she mumbled into his chest and sighed. "Okay, we don't have much time before they get here. Let's just do it and hope for the best." Skye inserted the probe above Free's eye. She had the other end of the micro-laser scanner hooked up to her computer and had the data transferred in seconds to the program in the biolab. Free had already called up Major Tom that second. There was no use avoiding the AI. It knew where they were, and told the Jasons where they were, and it also knew their plan. It knew everything, and Free suspected that it had a preordained agenda, which included running the Jason they had created. He did not know who was behind all of this, whether it was the government of Earth 2, if this was some remnant of Castillo's reign on Elysium, or, and he prayed that it wasn't so, Jackson Mansfield had something to do with all of this. But none of that mattered. They had little time, and not many options. Part of Major Tom II's mission was to obey orders, and that included an order to input data into the newly created cyborg, which is what Free commanded it to do. "But only when I tell you to activate the data." "Certainly," MT said. Free and Skye just looked at each other. "Tell us the whereabouts of the Jasons," Free demanded. "Approaching the camp," the AI told them. Skye jerked visibly. "Are we almost done?" Free asked. Skye nodded. "Just a couple of seconds to go. There! At least we've got your DNA in there, and some of your brain patterns. I didn't have time to do a full transfer." "Whew, let's hope it's enough," Free said, helping Skye remove the suction cups from his scalp and along the top of his spinal cord. He jumped to his feet and said, "Wait here." "What are you going to do?" "Just stay here." He kissed her lips. "I'll be back." "Free!" she screamed as she watched him run out the door. The two Jasons were almost at the lab. Both of them spotted Free at the same time. The one without the machete was in the lead slightly, which would be Jason 3, and Free figured that should be so, since he was the more advanced version. He tried to catch the eye of Jason 3. Looking into those hellish orbs made Free feel weak and quite sick, engendering the feeling that death was imminent. But Free stared on. He stared into the eyes of what he now knew was his father, a father that now had some knowledge of his son. Jason 3 slowed, and Jason 2 picked up speed. Free ran out to greet them, then bolted to the left and then feigned right, then ran in a large circle around them, causing the two Jasons to separate in order to trap him. This is what Free thought they would do. His intention was to separate them, to delay them, and he sure hoped this would work. If not, he'd be torn apart or cut to ribbons, and that would be the end of that. Major Tom, activate the new data you input into Jason 3. It was as if the AI sighed. As you wish. Activation took 2 seconds. Before Free's eyes, everything changed. Jason 3 and Jason 2 stopped simultaneously. Their eyes left Free and went to each other. They were no longer identical. One of them had inside him additional DNA. DNA he recognized as familiar. And while that did not breed familial unity, it made him different from the other Jason. Different enough that now they both wanted to battle the strongest being in the vicinity. And the strongest on this moon was the other Jason. Jason 2 was 3 meters to the left of Free, and Jason 3 3 meters to the right of him. Carefully and slowly Free backed away, leaving just the two of them in what was like a virtual ring. Suddenly number 2 lunged. A split second later number 3 leapt toward him. Free couldn't believe this. It was all he had hoped for and more. They were attacking each other. Free knew full well that neither daddy had made the move to save his son. This was pure murderous rage at work. With the honed instinct of an AI predator, Jason 2 had that machete lifted above his head, but he wasn't quite fast enough. Jason 3 ducked out of the way and plowed into the other's legs, knocking him off his feet. The two killer giants wrestled on the ground, fists pounding, hands choking, the machete struggling to find a mark, and when it did, it stabbed number 3 in the back. Free was amazed to see that that did not slow number 3 down at all. The two beings leapt to their feet, facing off like hockey players, the machete between them like a hockey stick. Free could not tear his eyes away. Jason 2 had the machete, but number 3 had the advantage of being all that Jason 2 was, and then some. Number 2 swung the machete again. This time, number 3 caught his opponent's wrist in the air. He bashed the arm against the skull of number 2, and the machete went flying into the air. Now they were hand to hand, and it wasn't going to be pretty. To Free's eyes, they were two deranged entities battling it out. Each anticipated the other's moves. Jason 3 punched Jason 2 in the face, and at the same time 2 kicked 3 hard in the stomach. Both went flying in opposite directions. Their speed was not a normal human speed, but the pace of something or someone superhuman. Free got the sense, somehow, that Jason 2 knew number 3 for the superior creation that it was, possibly the most powerful being in the vicinity, and that's why he waited for it. Free knew that they both realized that he and Sky weren't going anywhere. Both Jasons were convinced they could get at them any time. It must be like a macabre game to them, Free thought. A very simple game. You exist, I kill you, but I kill the strongest first. Then I kill you two. It was a game Jason never really lost, and now there were 2 of them playing at it. As the 2 got into the fight more heavily, Free used the opportunity to dart past them, heading toward the lab. He felt the earth rumble again, nearly knocking him off his feet, and looked up. The sling had edged slowly toward the camp, tearing more of the outer layer of the dome as it went. It would be directly over the camp soon. Their one chance to escape. Once in the lab, Sky ran to him sobbing. "What happened out there?" "There's no time to talk. Come on." He pulled her out the back door of the lab, and they raced toward the spot where the elevator had dropped them on arrival. "MT, send down the elevator," Free ordered. The AI did not respond, and Free hoped it could still multitask. They had so little time. Suddenly the earth trembled again, and both Free and Sky clung to one another to keep from falling as they looked up to see the sling move more toward the point where they had entered the dome. "We need that elevator!" Free screamed. How the hell could they get the elevator down without the help of Major Tom? Or maybe, Free thought gloomily, it didn't matter anymore. "Major Tom!" "At your service." Are you still controlling Jason 3? Jason 3 is no more. Free and Sky looked at one another. So Jason 2 won the fight. He did not. What are you saying? Both of them are dead? In a manner of speaking, yes. God! Sky cried, her body trembling. Can they really be dead? We've got to get out of here, Free said. Major Tom, you told me that the bottom line is that you are programmed to provide life support for human beings, no matter what. Is that right? Yes, that is correct. And that's still the case? Correct again. Life support includes escape mechanisms. Should the human inhabitants feel this environment cannot sustain their life, that is correct also. The 2 remaining human inhabitants believe that this environment can no longer sustain human life. Bring the elevator above the camp down to ground level. As you wish. Sky looked amazed. We could have done this before, all along. Why did any of us think of this before? We could have, but I know I didn't make the connection that life support is not just air, water, food, but it also includes escape mechanisms, because the idea is to sustain life at all costs. But whether we realized it then or now, we've got the same problem. The elevator has nowhere to take us but up. And there's no shuttle waiting for us up there, just the sling, which we might miss, or which we might not even be able to enter, and which is filled with dangerous convicts headed to a moon they might not survive on. Yeah, we might be killed in any number of ways, and if we miss the sling, we could starve to death waiting for your friend Jackson to send help, if he gets the message at all, and if he sends help. Good point. The elevator took about half a minute to get us down when we arrived. Should be the same now. The elevator, the AI said, was powered up for your arrival. It is set dormant, and now will take approximately 10 of your Earth 2 minutes to power up. Then about 30 seconds to descend. Great, Free said, exasperated. Then to Sky. Look, let's gather as many lightweight supplies as we can carry, like nutrition capsules and crystallized water, so we don't have to lug anything heavy. If we miss the sling, we might be up there a long time. They both ran toward the store. We'll grab a couple of blankets, he told her, though I think we can get MT to control the temperature up there. Just as they rounded the corner of the store, Sky held him back. Jason stood in the clearing, at the center of the camp, machete in his hand, standing amidst the bodies. Forget the supplies, she whispered. Free just stared. Jason still exists, doesn't he? Yes, Major Tom said. Which one? Both, MT replied. As he and Sky turned and raced back toward the descending elevator, Free demanded, Explain! Quite simply, they battled. The survivor, who was as you called him, Jason 3, absorbed all that was Jason 2. Now there is one. You've done a remarkable job. I commend you, Free. Free couldn't believe it. Jason was alive and well and headed in their direction. No need to even confirm it. He could sense that Jason had sensed them. They were the last 2 human beings who would die on Elysium. You told us they died, Sky gasped, staggering along, every bone in her body exhausted, her voice filled with hopelessness like a child that had discovered she'd been lied to. I believe I said they died, in a manner of speaking. There is no they, simply he. The one I made? Oh my God, he's the new Jason? The strongest Jason ever? Her voice lowered as if she had been given up all remaining hope. Really? That is correct, MT said. And my mission and my programming are virtually complete, if you will excuse the pun. Free grabbed Sky, who had stopped and pulled her beyond where the elevator was descending at a snail's pace, and headed toward Crystal Lake. Free, we're not going to make it, she said. Come on, he yelled. There's safety on top of the dome from Jason. He can't get to us if we're up there, but we've got to dodge him until the elevator makes it down to ground level. The second after he said this, Sky was wrenched from his grasp. It took Free a moment to realize that she was gone. He spun around to see Sky in the clutches of Jason, being lifted into the air, her feet dangling, her arms flailing. "No!" he screamed, charging the giant, hell-bent on freeing her. Jason backhanded him in the face, instantly splitting Free's lower lip and snapping his head to the side of his body as he went flying. He only stopped his flight when his head hit the elevator, which had just about descended and was coming to rest on the ground. The elevator was the last thing Free was aware of before he passed out. Sky screamed, punching and kicking, just as she had seen others do when Jason had them. But it was as if she were a child in the grasp of a giant. Despite how active her body was, her mind and emotions were shutting down. She did not feel her body move or hear her voice. It was as though she were dreaming that awful recurring dream, locked in the paralysis of the nightmare world. In her mind, she was in a dark corridor, the ground splitting in front and behind her. And when she looked down, she saw that in fact the ground was splitting all around them, as the moon rumbled and quaked, and Jason struggled to keep his footing. Then suddenly the tremors stopped. In that moment, Sky watched coolly, calmly, knowing the outcome could not be other than she always envisioned it would be. What she had always known would happen would come to pass. A part of her felt that in some way this was her reward for resurrecting her father's work. Her life did not flash before her eyes, but a synchronistic connection did. If she had not found the cubes, if she had not studied engineering, if she had not taken this job, she would not be here now, living out what should be images from the trash can of her psyche. And at the end of these thoughts, she realized that if she had not done these things, she would not have met Free and felt, for a brief period of her short life, love. The machete sliced across her neck as if she were made of soft cheese. There was no physical pain, only emotional. She realized as her head flew straight up into the air, just as it had over and over in her dreams. She realized that she and her body were no longer connected, and she understood the entirety of everything. All of it in the fragment of the second when she realized that she was dead. It was a state beyond emotions. Her pain was spiritual. With fading consciousness as her head plummeted after her body, she watched the darkness below open up to engulf her body and Jason. And she only stopped falling when something sharp entered her left eye and pierced her brain, and brought with it a light so bright it broke open and permeated everything that she had ever been. Finally, Sky slept peacefully. Chapter 18. Free came to consciousness slowly, his head spinning. He felt like puking, and it took all his control to not do that. Besides being dizzy, he had trouble focusing, and sucked in some deep breath, letting them out slowly, waiting for his vision to clear, and his stomach to settle down before he attempted to stand. His head hurt all over, but especially at the back, and he touched the back of his scalp gingerly to feel a tender lump. He also felt a wet stickiness that, when he pulled his hand back before his eyes, he knew was blood. It was then he remembered that he had been knocked into the air and hit his head, and probably suffered a minor concussion. Once he was on his feet, he began to look around. The elevator, the camp, and a large split in the soil that had created a kind of wide pit that he didn't remember seeing before. There was nobody in sight. "Sky?" he called tentatively. "Sky! Oh, where are you?" Silence greeted him. What was happening? Sure, he'd been knocked out, but that didn't mean he was dreaming, did it? Why was he the only one here? "Hey!" he called. His vision finally returned, and he was able to see with clarity. To the right, he saw Crystal Lake. To the left, in the distance, he saw the main part of the camp. The cabins, the lab, the store, and bodies. Many, many bodies, mostly in parts, all strewn around the grounds, like life-size toy soldiers that had died in battle. Memories began to surface, and while the concussion kept him from putting them together, into a cohesive whole, he saw flashes of murders being committed, and a clear mental picture of the murderer. "Jason," he said aloud. He looked up. The sling was just about at the spot where he and the others on the team had entered the dome. He had a plan to get up there with Skye. He remembered now. He remembered the plan. But where was she? "Skye!" he yelled, and heard a faint echo of his voice. Panic began to edge up his spine. He couldn't recall where he had last seen her. "Perhaps I can come to your aid," a familiar voice said. "Major Tom, what happened?" "I believe you are concussed." "Tell me what I don't know," Free said, rubbing his head, trying to ease the pain so that the headache that was subsiding would diminish faster. "I could use an aspirin." "I would suggest that you take—" "What happened? I can't remember it all." "Where would you like me to begin?" Free thought for a moment about what he did remember. He recalled being with Skye, waiting impatiently for the elevator to drop down. They were going to the store to gather supplies. They wanted to flee here, to get away from... "Jason," the AI said. "You were hoping to escape Jason." Free shook his head. "But weren't there two of them, or did I imagine that?" Even as the AI explained again how they had amalgamated, Free's memory of that returned. He remembered as well when he and Skye had seen the survivor, the union of everything every Jason of the past had been. Jason to the third power, rounding the corner. Then he and Skye ran to the elevator, but it wasn't there yet. Then suddenly, in a blinding flash, Free remembered Skye being torn away from him, as if it were happening all over again. He had charged Jason to help her. That's when he had been backhanded and catapulted through the air and struck his head and... "Where's Skye?" he asked, his voice rising with fear, sinking with impending despair. "Perhaps you should look in the fissure." Free walked slowly to the wide gap in the soil, his steps heavy, his heart heavier. As he neared, he saw the split was not just wide, but deep, growing deeper in his vision the closer he got. Soon he stood at the edge, peering down into the blackness. "Illumination," he said, and MT complied instantly. The chasm must have been 25 meters deep and stretched into infinity in both directions. With the light MT provided, he could see to the bottom. Twisted and curled in on itself was Skye's body, arms and legs at impossible angles. She would have broken her back, he thought, and many other bones. He knew he was being too logical, aware that he felt too calm and analytical, aware that the most grotesque aspect of what he saw was not the positioning of her body, but the fact that her head was not attached to it. His eyes scanned the cavern until he saw her head, 5 meters further along, her long, beautiful hair surrounding it like a dark halo. Her eyes stared blankly. Dead eyes, he thought, or at least the one, since the other was bashed in by pieces of something that might have been zephyr glass. Just like her father, he thought, 3 pieces of glass in the eye. Everything in threes. Death at the hands of Jason. What a horribly ironic end. And still he felt anesthetized. Out of the blue, a sudden pain hit him at chest level. He knew it was his heart. It felt more like a fierce ache that intensified with every breath. On each exhale, tears leaked from his eyes and low moans from his throat, until finally he was yelling, "No, no, 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 Skye, no!" He fell to his knees, holding his head with his hands, kneeling at the grave of his beloved, sobbing out of control, suffering an agony he did not know until this moment that he was capable of feeling. Free could not take it in. Skye, the woman he loved, lying in a grave at his feet, dead. His head suddenly felt both heavy and empty, as if every thought he had or would ever possess dropped down into his gut and rolled around in a cauldron of instant despair. Then the pain inside his chest began burning him with laser intensity, searing away parts of him that he wanted, needed, longed for. What would give his existence meaning amidst all the horror that had overshadowed his life? And suddenly, Irrevocably, he knew he would never be the same again. As if responding to a question, the AI said, "Yes, I believe if you intend to get to the sling, now would be the appropriate time to board. The elevator. By my calculations, you have exactly 7 minutes until..." But Free tuned MT out. He tuned the AI out because he saw something else in the chasm. The body of Jason, lying face down. The burning pain that had been in his heart exploded like a firebomb, turning into a rage that boiled through him. Free wanted to jump down there, grab the machete, and stab and cut the remains until there was nothing left. No flesh intact, no veins and arteries unsevered, no organs not punctured, no limbs not sliced off from the torso, no bones not cut from one another. He wanted to gouge out the eyes, stab up through the nostrils, into the mouth and ears, cut off the genitals, cut off his head, burn out his heart. In order to align yourself with the sling, you now have exactly 5 minutes, 52 seconds, 51 seconds. Free dragged his eyes from the fissure. The AI, as if sensing that he needed to stop looking, dimmed the lighting in the chasm, and the hole became dark, even more like a grave. Free's mind raged. He did not want his beloved buried in the same place as Jason. But a more rational part of him was surfacing. He could come back here, exhume her later, rebury her, or better still, cremate her remains and scatter them throughout the universe. All but for a small glass vial he would fill and seal and wear close to his shattered heart for the rest of his life. He knew he would never love another. Never. You now have exactly 4 minutes, 29 seconds, 28. Free rose and walked to the elevator. He entered the glassed-in cage and said to MT, "Take me up. I want to get the hell off of Elysium." The elevator began to rise. It was no more than 2 feet from ground level when out of the chasm Free saw a blur of movement. Jason. He wasn't dead. He didn't even look harmed. His body, covered with soil that he shook off like a dog, had leapt out of the hole and landed on the ground, as if 25 meters were only 25 centimeters, and now he was moving fast. And Free stared in horror as the monster that shared his DNA hurled himself into the air and caught the lower edge of the elevator and hung onto it with both hands as it rose rapidly into the sky. Okay, Free thought, this is bad. Really bad. He knew that taking Jason with him did not just endanger his own life, but that of the prisoners as well. How the hell could he just hang on like that? Surely the air thinned as the elevator ascended, but maybe not. Elysium was so artificial that maybe it was consistent all the way up. But what could he do about Jason hanging on? Could he fight Pop and survive? A barking laugh of despair came out of Free. Jason was probably triple Free's weight, had a muscle mass that Free couldn't even guesstimate, had no spare fat to speak of, plus abilities like moving that fast without running, moving so fast it belied his weight and height, and a pure killer instinct that nothing could penetrate. Free figured no. A physical fight with his biological old man who had survived centuries and was only partly human was definitely out of the question. He glanced down through the glass floor at the elevator, at the malevolent face turned upward, and those hellfire eyes bore into Free's. Already Jason was hauling himself up higher, so that his head came to the side of the elevator, to the height of Free's ankles. Free could feel his body covered with the cold sweat of fear. He tore his eyes away and looked up. The elevator would enter the first layer of the dome, fitting into a kind of box or shaft that was designed just for it. Free hoped that Jason would not be able to get to that level, which held the corridor. The elevator had arrived and the doors were opening at an agonizingly slow pace. He would know soon. Free looked down quickly. Jason had lowered himself again, so that he was under the elevator's glass floor, but for his fingertips. Free thought longingly of how, If there was any justice in the universe, those fingers would have been severed, and Jason would be plummeting to his death. But the shaft and the elevator were not a perfect fit, and the gap was just big enough for the massive fingers to retain their grip and to allow Jason to cling to the elevator, to life. Couldn't anything kill him? Free wondered. The second the elevator doors opened wide enough, Free slipped out and raced along the corridor toward the airlock, which would take him to the narrow platform. He hoped to hell the sling's cage stopped there, or at least paused long enough for him to get into it. He had to get into the cage, because if he didn't, already Jason had broken through the floor of the elevator, hauled himself up, and was rushing down the corridor, at a speed Free found astonishing for someone not even running. The airlock had closed, and Free started up the steep ladder. The sling looked just about in place, but for a couple of inches. Even if it was not perfect, he thought he could get to the top of the airlock, get the airlock sealed around the cage's door, and then figure out how to get inside. Once he got the door open, he had no idea what or who would be waiting there, but it didn't matter. Whatever was inside was better than what was coming up the ladder after him. "MT, surround the sling's cage with the airlock." He was near the top and saw the seal automatically begin to surround the cage's door. He stepped onto the narrow platform and searched quickly for some way to enter, but ended up just pounding on the door in desperation. Below him, Jason was about halfway up the ladder. "MT, crack the top of the dome so that the sling basket can move out of here, but wait for my signal." Free knew that even if he got inside the basket, unless the sling started moving fast, Jason would also get in. And unlike Free, Jason would smash his way through the metal, shattering the door, which, as the sling moved away from Elysium, would expose those inside to the vacuum of space. They would all be sucked out, and everything inside their bodies would be sucked out of them too, as they would become instant shells. Survival hinged on that sling moving fast, with Free inside, Jason outside, and the integrity of the basket intact. "Wait for my voice signal," Free said again. As he pounded on the door, he yelled, "Help! Let me in! Open the door from inside!" Finally, a voice came from inside the basket. "Who the fuck's out there?" "My name is Free. Please, let me in. It's a matter of life and death." "Why the fuck should we?" "Who the fuck is Free?" another voice said. "Ain't no Free in this prison. Maybe he's a screw." "We fucking killed all the guards, you idiot!" "I'm not a guard," Free explained, trying to sound logical and also trying to keep the massive hysteria out of his voice, but he failed. "In a minute, I'll get sucked into space. Let me in. I want to go with you." A harsh laugh from the other side of the door. "Who the fuck cares?" And another said, "Why the fuck would anybody want to go to Thanos? Please, just open the door. I can help you people." Jason was 3/4 of the way to the landing when the door to the cage opened. A huge, bearded, muscular man who looked like evil incarnate stood in the doorway staring at Free, whose body was blocking the view of the ladder and Jason steadily climbing up it. "It's a kid," the man said. "Hey, we can get out of here and back down to Elysium." "Yeah, let's do it," another behind him yelled. A new grisly face appeared in the doorway, with the big con as a crowd formed behind them both. "No, wait, you don't understand," Free said. "Yeah, we do. We ain't going to no fucking Thanos for the rest of our lives." The big guy kicked out, knocking Free back and down. He fell against the ladder and bounced as he went past Jason, all the way down to the floor of the airlock. Jason was now visible to the cons inside. "Well, what the fuck?" one of them said. As Jason climbed to the top of the ladder, placing one foot on the platform, he and the meaty guy locked eyes, challenging one another. Free had fallen on his back, hurting his tailbone, but not so much that he couldn't sit up. "Now, MT," he said, hoping that the sling would move away, that the prisoners would close the door, and that at least they would be free of Jason, even if Free would never be. His best hope was that Jason would be sucked into space. The sling began to inch forward as the dome cracked in front of it, creating a path. The insta-airlock began to shrink around the door, but the guy in the doorway just stood there yelling, "Hey, fucker, you want a piece of this? Come and get it." Free crawled out of the airlock at the base and fell into the corridor. "MT, seal the airlock at the bottom and the top! And close the door of that sling basket!" "Unable to close the door of the basket, but I can comply with the rest." Free watched as the airlock seal shrunk further. It seemed to be enough for the prisoner, stupid as he was, to realize that they couldn't enter the dome now, and that they would be sucked into space if he didn't close that goddamn door, and that Jason was about to leap out of the airlock and inside the basket. "Shut the door! Shut the door!" Free yelled as loud as he could. He watched as the sling basket moved forward into the fissure that MT created. The guy in the doorway took it all in. Finally. From where he was, Free couldn't hear him, but the door suddenly closed as the basket moved further into the crack, and Jason lunged for the door that slammed shut in his face, just as the airlock sealed shut. Free hobbled along the corridor, back to the elevator that would take him back down to the surface of the moon Elysium. He did not have much hope that Jason would be sucked out into space. Likely, the airlock seal at the top would prevent that. All Free could do was get down to the surface and see if he could keep the elevator down there so that Jason couldn't follow him. At least not until he found another way off the moon. And Free was sure he would find a way. And he had at least one AI helping him. Though in actual fact, there was probably only one AI left anyways now. Free glanced up. Jason was nothing if not resourceful and determined. As if reading his mind, MT said, "It's in the genes." "Is that supposed to make me feel better?" Free mumbled, but the AI did not respond. The elevator floor was damaged, and Free figured that it would not be good for him to drop such a great distance to the surface. "MT, can you repair the damage to this elevator?" "Already in progress." The breaks and ragged cracks were being sealed, and Free pressed his palms to the walls so he could balance around the repairs, holding on despite the pain in his back. He felt disheartened. He would end up on Elysium alone. Not alone, but with Jason. The AI had an agenda, to aid Free's survival, but it had another agenda, and that was to help the being that it controlled. Here was MT controlling Jason and helping Free at the same time. It was totally insane, a paradox in itself, but Free knew who MT was rooting for, and Free also knew he had nowhere to hide. Maybe it would be best to just kill himself. At least he could be with Sky. As the elevator began to descend, he looked up, terrified of what he would see. The sling's basket was just at the edge of leaving the dome completely for its journey through space to the moon Thanos. In the blink of an eye, Jason turned his head and looked down. It was as if even from this distance, Free could feel the burning of those eyes, boring through his soul. What was the monster thinking? Suddenly, Jason turned his attention back to the cage. He crouched low, and then propelled himself like an athlete into the air. The machete broke through the top of the airlock, and the fist of his other hand smashed through the opening. Free watched in awe as Jason seemed to be pulled into space, and a spark of hope revived in him. Maybe the universe was benevolent after all. The vortex was forcing him out of the airlock. He would be sucked to his doom. At that moment, the basket moved away from the dome. Jason lunged and reached for it and grabbed on. He pulled himself up and out of the airlock and clung to the bottom of the basket as it now freely fell forward into space. Free, amazed, watched as Jason crawled the length of the basket and clutched onto the arm that held it. He should be dead. How can he breathe up there? The nanoants that Castillo talked about, that had been implanted into Jason many years before Castillo even got his hands on the killer. They must have been revived as well when he brought Jason back. The nanoants are in the programming, MT said, as if reading Free's mind. And of course, when the two Jasons amalgamated. So we revived the ants? And even if we hadn't, they were transferred from 2 to 3? Free said. Not really a question, because he knew the answer. He was just really thinking out loud. It explained why the Jasons never really got hurt, and why he revived almost instantly, why he had the power of 10 men, why he could survive in airless space, even though he was still human. or partially so. Yes, the AI confirmed, although Free had no need of confirmation. The elevator reached the surface and Free dragged himself out. He looked around at the camp, the destruction and the bodies. As the only living being on this moon, he felt despair settle over him. Above him, the sling moved away rapidly on its course through dark space, toward an even darker point in the sky, Thanos. "He'll survive it, won't he?" he asked MT. "Quite likely." "And he'll kill all the prisoners?" "If he can, of course." "Why?" Free asked, as any son would ask about the actions of a father that were inexplicable. In this case, the actions of a mass murderer. And the why had so many connotations, too many. "That's who he is," MT said. Free felt deflated, more than depressed. He wondered if Jackson got the message, and when he would get here. Worst case scenario, Free had another 5+ months to survive here, with the ghosts, until the first shuttle was scheduled to arrive. Yes, he had escaped with his life, but what was his life now? He was alone. Now, always. And he was the son of Jason. Could he ever lead anything resembling a normal life, knowing what he had been through, knowing who his father was? Free wondered what his life was about, why he was born, why he alone had survived. How could he be the only one with strength enough to survive? Or was he just lucky? Suddenly he said, "MT, am I like him? Am I like him in any way?" MT paused. "I suppose you will need to find that out for yourself." Did you help me survive? I am programmed to aid in the survival of human beings. And the survival of Jason. Especially Jason, right? Yes, especially Jason. And he and I share DNA, so you helped me. The AI did not respond. Why? Why was I the only one saved? But Free, you aren't the only one. There are the prisoners headed to Thanos. And in case you ever forget, Jason has survived. He will always survive. It's in his nature. The end. Okay, this has been the conclusion of Jason X to the Third Power. I hope everybody's enjoyed this book. I have actually thoroughly enjoyed this book. I know it's the final book in the Jason X series, and I kind of hate that it was left on a cliffhanger, and I kind of don't like that Skye died. I really thought that she would survive the prophetic dream that she kept having. I thought that Free, would be the wild card that would actually save her in the end from that demise. So I wasn't too thrilled about that. I did enjoy that Nancy Kilpatrick, the author of this book and Planet of the Beast, the third Jason X book, I do like that she continued the story and that Free was the baby, that was put into London and Planet of the Beast, with Jason's DNA. I did enjoy that. I do not regret doing this part 5 before I did part 4, because now I think doing part 4 is going to be even more interesting, as it's going to be like a prequel to this final book, and a lot of the backstory is going to be filled in. And I think that's going to be a lot of fun whenever we get to Jason X Death Moon, which is actually the 4th book out of the 5. To the Third Power was the 5th and final book. So this is how the Jason X novel saga ends, but we still have part 4, the prequel, which will be coming very soon. The next book I'm going to do is going to be called Friday the 13th, Jason's Curse by Eric Morse. But yeah, guys, let me know what you thought of this book in the comments section. Like I said, I really enjoyed the story. I really kind of dug, two Jasons going at it there at the end, two Uber Jasons going at it there at the end. And the way I see it, Jason had a choice to either stay and kill the one guy being free, whether it was his son or not, or Jason could go with all those prisoners and whenever, either get into that thing with them and kill them, or wait till they get somewhere and have a bunch of people to kill. So Jason stayed true to character. He went with the multiple people, the multiple victim plan. And in our minds, we can always think that Uber Jason is still out there, going from one place to another. Somehow he finds a way. All right, guys, I've really enjoyed this book, and I'm looking forward to doing the next one for you. So I'll see you very soon when I begin the next book in the 80s Slasher Library, which is actually book number 20. So yeah, that's we've hit a really big milestone here. We're about to start the 20th book. I can't believe how far we've come. Anyways, this has been your friendly neighborhood 80s Slasher Librarian saying, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.